Welcome to another episode from EduExcel. I'm your host, Nirmala Thakur. Lala Lajpat Rai, one of India's foremost freedom fighters and social reformers, strongly believed that true political freedom was impossible without the social emancipation of the deprived classes. He emphasized that education was the most powerful tool to awaken these marginalized communities, helping them arise to respectable positions in society and break free from centuries of oppression. Rai tirelessly worked to provide access to education for the untouchables and other depressed classes, urging society to come together and support this noble cause. In today's episode, we delve into his vision for uplifting the deprived classes through education and how his ideas remain deeply relevant in our quest for social justice and equality. Education is more than just learning, it's a powerful tool to break chains. In this episode, discover how Lala Lajpat Rai fought to bring education to India's deprived classes and why it still matters today. Education of Negroes and depressed classes. Lajpat Rai was sensitive enough to perceive some analogy between the Negro problem in the United States of America and the problem of depressed classes in India. The two cases did not match on all fours with each other, but there was a great deal common in them. The social problem in the United States was in some of its phases very similar to the social problems in India. That is why he proceeded to make on the spot study of the problem to know the condition of the Negroes in the United States firsthand. After the in-depth study of the problem, Lajpat Rai presented the state of Negro education in USA as follows: that the overwhelming majority of Negro children of school age were not in schools, that the chief reason for this was the lack of school facilities. The situation got muddied due to a further reason pertaining to the poverty and ignorance of parents. 3. That those Negro children who were in school were, as a rule, poorly taught by half prepared and poorly paid teachers. This was done through short term courses from 6 months to a year. 4. That the schoolhouses and equipment for Negro schools were for the most part wretched and inadequate. 5. That Negro schools, as a rule, received little or no helpful superintendence from the school authorities. 6. That resulting from this prejudice, and apparently one of the objects of the disfranchisement had been to cut down the Negro school funds, bar out competent teachers, lower the grade and efficiency of the course and study, employ those teachers in Negro schools who were willing tools and who did not protest or complain. 7. That in the attempt to introduce much needed and valuable manual and industrial training, there had been introduced into the curriculum of the Negro Common School a mass of ill considered, unrelated work which had overburdened the teacher and pushed into the background the vital studies of reading, writing, and arithmetic. In a large number of cases, this had been done with the avowed object of training the Negroes as menials and laborers, cutting them off from the higher avenues of life. 8. That the forward movement in education in South during the last 10 years had been openly confined almost entirely to white people. The movement for local school taxes, better high schools, consideration of schools, transportation of children had, with small exception, been encouraged and made possible among the whites and not among the Negroes. In many cases, the Negroes had been taxed for the improvement of white school facilities, while their own school had not been allowed to share in these improvements. Along with this curtailment of elementary public education uh, for Negroes, there had been a tendency to decry the work of those schools which were devoted to higher training of Negro youth, to lower their curricula, to cut off northern benevolence, and to decrease the supply of intellectual leaders for the Negro race. Continuing the comparison between the education of the Negroes in the USA and of the depressed classes in India, Lajpat Rai pointed to a feature of the education of the Negro which put an Indian to indescribable shame, viz., the education of the Negro woman. The facilities which existed in that country, USA, for the higher education of Negro women were decidedly larger, better, and more liberal than those that existed in India for the education of Indian women. Firstly, most of the Negro colleges and high schools were open to the girls. In some, the girls were actually in the majority. There were special schools for girls which were even better than similar schools for boys. In this connection, he referred to one such school called the Spelman School, which impressed him. This school covered an area of vast land with a number of magnificent buildings for teaching and residential purposes. The brick building provided ample room for the boarding department, the library, and the industrial work. He condemned in strong terms the policy of stepmotherly treatment meted out to Negroes and exposed the greedy nature of the American educational philosophers who applied two different yardsticks concerning the education of the Negroes and the whites. He wrote that this attitude of the Southern whites towards the education of the Negro had received a certain amount of support from that class of educational philosophers who decried providing them high education and extolled instead vocational education as they called it. These philosophers had no use for the mere theorists produced by high liberal education unrelated to the needs of life. They wanted to give them only such education as would raise the efficiency of the nation's workers as producers and wealth distributors of wealth and as pursuers of vocations which added to the material prosperity and material comforts of the nation. They estimated education by the amount of dollars it brought to the educated and the contribution which it made to the wealth of the nation and its efficiency as a wealth producing community. He foresaw that the struggle of the Negroes for their rights, development, and glorious future would go on. He appealed the Negroes to continue developing courage and self confidence and diligently pursue the highest education. He was convinced that the educated Negro would soon learn to present his own case before the bar of public opinion. The signs of awakening among them filled him with hope and faith in their future and destiny. The educated Negroes he met in the USA represented their first generation grown to the fullness of manhood under the influence and power of education. He felt heartened to see that the hope of the whole race was focused in them. They were the headlight to direct the pathway through the dangers and vicissitudes of the wilderness. For want of vision, people perished, and for want of wise direction, they stumbled and fell, he said. Lajpat Rai viewed the future development of the depressed classes in India with a sense of robust optimism. He saw their redemption only in education, which was not to be confined only to the petty handicrafts, but when would open them out to embrace the benefit of higher education along with their fellow citizens. He was confident that, guided by the light of knowledge and wisdom, they would surely come to occupy the highest position in the country's life. The educational needs of the depressed classes encompassed every aspect of human life and continued to engage his attention throughout his life. He opened a large number of schools for them, offered general scholarships from his own income, and founded the Servants of People Society, a life order of political sannyasis in 1921, to continue the task of political education of the masses and eradicating the blot of untouchability from the face of the Hindu society. Lala Lajpat Rai passionately believed that education was the most powerful tool to uplift the depressed classes, awaken their self worth, and integrate them as respected members of society. He urged society and government alike to invest in their education, emphasizing that true social reform and national freedom were incomplete without their emancipation through learning. His unwavering commitment to providing access to quality education set a foundation for equality and dignity.